The Big 12 Conference has become the Wild West for offensive football, but there are defensive reinforcements on the way. From the Dodge Sports Desk, I'm Mike Sherman, and this is the Bedlam Nation Conversation. I'm here with OU beat writer Jake Trotter and OSU beat writer Scott Wright. Guys, National Signing Day is Wednesday, and it looks from the commitment list for OU and OSU that it's a defensive year for both schools. Is that just a coincidence, or is it a cause and effect of the kind of season that we just saw in the Big 12 last year? You first, Scott.
In the case of Oklahoma State, it's a little bit of both. They, regardless of what kind of offenses they're going against, they needed some defensive depth. Lost 4 of their top 5 safeties, their 2 starting defensive tackles. They really were kind of short on the defensive line anyway as far as depth goes. So they needed to build up after that big junior college class that they brought in a year ago. It was time to kind of cycle back to the freshmen and try to start building for the future a little bit.
Jake, what about OU?
Well, I think for OU it's a case of alternating which side of the ball you want to focus on. Last year it was a big offensive class. They signed a number of wide receivers, had a couple running backs, including Justin Johnson Calhoun, who were 2 of the top 5 in the nation. And then they had their big-time quarterback recruit, Landry Jones. So I think the focus was back on the defensive side. They got a number of linebackers, defensive linemen, and 4 safeties too, or 4 defensive backs too. So they got everything covered in the on the defensive side. And they lose some guys. They lost both safeties. In the next couple of years, they're going to lose a lot of linebackers and defensive linemen too. So it was time to replenish.
Can they recruit their way out of some of the defensive issues that they had last season with this recruiting class?
Well, as far as Oklahoma State, I think you're only probably going to see a couple of guys who come in and are ready to start right away. They had some other young guys who are probably going to step into some of those starting roles. Victor Johnson and Johnny Thomas were 2 guys at the safety positions. Lucian Antoine will be back from that torn ACL. So I think you'll probably only see this recruiting class is really kind of more for providing depth than anything else. There will be a couple of guys, Horace Hubbard, Andrew McGee, a defensive back, that you'll see on the field some this year, though.
We're going to take a break. On the other side, we'll come back and talk about some of those impact defensive players in the class of 2009. We're back on the Bedlam Nation Conversation, sponsored by Dodge. Scott, in the paper today and also on News OK, you wrote about Colton Richardson, the kid from Ada, 6'4", 225, good runner, guy who's probably going to slide into linebacker spot for OSU or safety. You can probably play both. But who's the most promising defender that OSU has coming in now for new defensive coordinator Bill Young?
Daquan Lowe is a kid that I'll be really excited to see what he's able to do. He's at that safety position, so there's a chance that he could work his way into the rotation really early and get in onto the field. They played 2 true freshman safeties last year in backup roles, so I think that he could slide in there. Obviously, a kid that's pretty well known around here, being at Carl Albert, but I think that he's got all the tools to come in and make an impact early.
Jake, you wrote about on Monday Jamarcus McFarland, kid from Texas, whose recruitment is now infamous. The New York Times profiled it, and you caught up with him about sort of how that felt to be the subject of that kind of story. But beyond him, who would you say is the biggest impact recruit they got coming in on defense?
Well, long term, I don't know. There's a lot of guys that you could look from. Justin Chizon at defensive end, a number of the linebacker guys, Ronnell Lewis, Tom Wart is a big-time player. But as far as guys who are going to play first, I would look in the defensive backfield and I would look at safety, because that's the spot in the next couple of years where OU's really got to replenish, having lost Lenny Holmes and Nick Harris. And that becomes Javon Harris out of Lawton Mack or Kevin Brent out of the Dallas area. So I think one of those 2 guys is going to be an impact player, maybe not a starter, but in the rotation. And I think we'll see one of those guys play first among this recruiting class, with the exception of the wide receiver JUCO transfer.
Something else we've talked about a lot in recent years is just sort of the impact of state recruits on the 2 programs. OU, we profiled a couple years ago about how OU wasn't getting as many in-state recruits, and OSU, Kansas built a lot of its success under Mangino a couple years ago on kids he got from the state. That turned around a little bit in this class, especially with OSU. Talk about that, Scott.
Well, yeah, they've got 7 kids. As we talk here on Tuesday, there's a chance that they might even add an 8th in-state guy, maybe Dante Foster from Guthrie. Yet to see exactly how that final spot might play out. But yeah, they hit Oklahoma really hard this year. They ended up with just as many in-state guys as they did Texas guys, which for Mike Gundy that's really a change in the norm for him. And not only that, they got big time players. They got guys to come in and fill needs. The Tulsa Union guys, Jeremy Smith and Tracy Moore, are both talented athletes that maybe they won't get on the field this year, but you're going to hear a lot from them down the road. Brandon Webb, Daquan Lowe, even Colton Richardson is a guy that I think is going to make a big impact. All the guys that they brought in this class are pretty solid players, and I think you're gonna be seeing them again.
And Tracy Moore is a solid commit for OSU now.
Yeah, he is. It seems to be a done deal. I guess you can't really say he's solid until he signs on the line, but as of right now, it looks like Oklahoma State's where he's going to end up.
Jake, the Sooners, not a huge increase in the number of in-state recruits, but again, they got a bunch of high-profile guys. Some of the best ones from Oklahoma went to OU, and the Sooners' recent success has been built on the back of Oklahoma players.
Well, look at the guys they have now on the team. Sam Bradford, Heisman Trophy winner. Gerald McCoy out of Oklahoma City, probably going to be a preseason Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year next year, an All-American. Dominique Franks was a second-team All-Big 12 selection at cornerback. And I'm probably forgetting some others. Jermaine Gresham is going to be a first-round draft pick. So they have a lot of high-impact guys from Oklahoma on that team. And I think that's one thing that they looked at is they didn't wait till the end to get the Oklahoma guys when they ran out of guys available in Texas, Louisiana, wherever. They targeted the Oklahoma kids first. Rennell Lewis was the first commitment that OU offered. I think Javon Harris was third or fourth. He was a guy they got really early. And they wanted Gabe Eichert, the tight end out of McGinnis, for a long time. They really had to pursue him to get him. So, and they were very happy to get Gabe Lynn too out of Jinx, who was a guy that Oklahoma State and some other schools wanted as well. So it was a nice recruiting class for OU in terms of the state of Oklahoma. Not as many guys as OSU got, but I think when you look at those four and Gus Jones, guys that could be all in the field, for OU down the line, 2011 or so.
Okay, let's take a break, and we'll come back on the other side and talk about who might be this year's Ryan Broyles. We're back on the Bedlam Nation conversation, sponsored by Dodge. I'm Mike Sherman with OSU beat writer Scott Wright and OU beat writer Jake Trotter. Guys, DeMontre Hurst is a defensive back out of Texas who is committed to OSU. Tell us more about him, and could he be this year's Ryan Broyles? Scott, you first.
Well, I don't want to say that he's going to be exactly Ryan Broyles with all the flip-flopping that went on late in his recruitment, but it's certainly kind of a bedlam battle for him right now. About a 5'11", 170-pound cornerback, good speed, and pretty good ball skills from what scouts say. So, he's committed to Oklahoma State right now. He's the guy that the Cowboys focused on after Gabe Lynn chose Oklahoma. This could be a big loss if he should choose the Sooners, because the Cowboys need him a lot more probably than Oklahoma does at this point. They've only got one other true cornerback in this class. They've got three of their top four guys are going to be seniors next year. So they really need to build some young depth at this position right now. Hurst would be a big get, and also a big loss if he goes south.
Who would he be to the Sooners, Jake?
Well, he would be the fifth defensive back. I mean, they have a lot of good guys at that position. Marcus Trice, who's a really smart kid at corner, and then Gabe Lynn, who is the number one player in the state of Oklahoma. So they're pretty good shape there, but you can always use cornerbacks in the Big 12, and he would be a guy that would come in and compete with those guys for playing time. They're going to have to replace the corners in I guess, a year and a half, 1 year and then 2 years, because Brian Jackson's going to graduate next season, and then Dom Franks the year after that. And, you play a lot of corners at times as well. You'd like to have 3 or 4 in a rotation that you can trust. OU really hasn't gotten to that point the past couple of years. But I think he's a guy that obviously would be a talented player and would compete for playing time. But clearly OSU really needs this guy. And, for OU, he's a guy that if they get, great. If not, they're still okay.
Dante Foster, and this guy are two of the main suspenseful angles hanging around for signing day. On signing day, there'll be a ton of coverage on News OK. We'll be doing our almost hourly updates right here from the studio. But where will you guys be? You first, Jake.
I'm going to be in Dewar, Oklahoma early in the morning for Rennell Lewis's signing day. He's an early enrollee, so he's got to schedule his signing day around OU practice or workouts, I should say, in class. So we're going to be bright and early in Dewar. Should be a big time there because they haven't had an athlete of this caliber in 25, 30 years since they had a minor league baseball player. So it's going to be a big time in Dewar.
Okay, Scott, where are you going?
I'm going to head up to Tulsa Union. Jeremy Smith and Tracy Moore will both be signing with Oklahoma State. I said earlier, like I said, these guys might not be on the field next year, but these are two guys that you're going to hear a lot from down the road at Oklahoma State. Two really big signings. If you can get some kind of a pipeline going to Tulsa Union, it never works out too bad.
Thanks, guys. Listen, you can stay with all the best coverage anywhere, every day at newsok.com and every morning in the Oklahoman. You can continue the conversation about recruiting and all things Bedlam at bedlamnation.com, the only website geared to both OU and OSU fans. And come back right here on signing day for our updates and all the coverage that you'll need about signing day 2009.